Every CMO that we talk to says that they want AI transformation. Almost none of them can tell you what that means to their team 6 months from now. So, every few months, a new wave of AI tools arrives, and the marketing industry does the same thing. It announces a transformation. Budgets move, vendors get called, pilots get launched, and then, quietly, most of it settles back into the old way of working. But something is shifting in the conversations that we're having at a senior level. Because the question is no longer, should we use AI? It's, what does it mean for how we actually serve our clients, build our teams, and deliver work? And that's a much harder question to answer honestly. So, welcome to our podcast, The Pencil Perspective. I'm Tim, joined, as always, by Will. And today, we have a guest who we think is going to open up some of the most honest conversations we've had so far. Elaine Choi, VP AI Transformation for Americas at Pencil. Hi, Elaine. I should say hi, Will, as well.
You can if you want. Hi, Tim.
So, Elaine has spent her career on the client services side, building relationships with brands like Google, Uber, Airbnb, and Japan Airlines. And now she's the person those brands call when they want to figure out what AI transformation actually means to them. Not in theory, but in practice. So, today we're asking, what do enterprise clients actually want when they say AI transformation? And what are they really getting? When a major brand comes to you and says they want AI transformation, what are they actually asking for? Like, what's in the brief versus what's actually underneath that for them?
No, absolutely. I think, well, first of all, I don't think right now for many it's an actual want. I think it's a must-have. And I think it's a small yet important distinction because it kind of points to intent. So the way I'd answer that really is I think what they're coming for is immediate effect. They want to see how much money they're saving, how much time they're saving. But ultimately, what they're coming to us for is that sustained change. It takes a while for them to understand and realize that that's what they need in order for the program to actually be effective. But I would say that's the two distinct layers that I'm saying.
What's the most common misconceptions that a CMO has when they come asking for AI transformation?
I think there's two distinct ways of looking at that, and I think they're actually related. So I think number one is that assuming tech adoption alone will trigger transformation. And then number two is really ignoring that human aspect of what transformation truly is for a company. So what I'm saying is that from a leadership level, making those decisions, not quite understanding the gaps that the organization has. So then you're putting sort of the pressure on middle management to be the ones to try and transform an organization where they don't have either the power, the insight, or the guidance to do so. And then what you see is that crushing pressure going down on people who are delivering from day to day that's being affected by what the output needs to be and what they're not being empowered with. So I think that the gap there that the misconception is actually pulling into the organization is where I think Pencil's coming in.
It'd be really interesting if you've got like one specific example, obviously without naming any names, but have you seen this happening?
I've seen it happen in both smaller companies and larger companies. That assumption. So when ultimately CMOs are expecting money to be saved very quickly, speed of assets to be produced. And then what you're seeing is that by the time it's going into reality, the people on the floor doing the actual delivery is saying, actually, in the short term, we actually need more money. So then that's going back up to the CMOs, making them really confused. And then ultimately, it's the tech that gets blamed. So I think that pattern has been a pattern that we've seen multiple times with clients in varying degrees. But I imagine by the end of the year, we'll see less of that. But for right now, that has been the tension point.
All right, I've definitely got a question here. So this one's quite real, I think, and it goes to the people side of transformations, right? So there are broadly three things a brand can do when they're trying to transform around AI, right? They can replace part of the team, retrain the team they have, or they can layer new tools on top of processes that were already there and maybe even already broken. Which ones of these are you seeing actually happen most right now? And do you have any thoughts on how those are panning out, those different strategies?
I would say for more traditional companies, I've seen replace very quickly. With tech companies, I've seen retrain. I think that's just a model that they're used to because they've been dealing with change so much within the tech world. But I'd say traditional companies have been, let's go for replace. I'm seeing a little less of that and going for a retrain. But it varies all over. But I would say those are the patterns that I'm seeing. I would say when it comes to papering over processes that are broken, that already exist, everyone is guilty of it. Largely because I think a lot of organizations have broken processes that have been in place for years, if not decades. And I think that's what AI is doing. It's like putting a big light on all these little cracks and large cracks that are in organizations. And there's places where people don't even realize things are broken. So I think everyone's guilty. I mean, even the most advanced companies in AI, the ones who are embracing it the most, are still finding things that they're realizing are essentially broken in their organization that isn't fit for the AI world. So I think the ones that are really smart about it are the ones who can pivot, the ones who are, I think, grounded enough to understand that they're going to find a lot of mistakes and a lot of obstacles, and their job is to find ways around those obstacles. But I don't see anyone who isn't papering over broken processes already.
I think there's so many anecdotes of senior marketers who had no idea that the processes were broken until AI forced them to inspect how their organizations work in a granular way, which is hopeful. I think slightly less hopeful that teams are replacing parts of the team wholesale. Clearly, from a mission perspective, that is not what we want to happen. Explicitly, we want to design ways of avoiding that. But I think it's worth going a level deeper, right? Because sometimes teams do need to be changed and the makeup of teams need to be changed. How do you minimize it? Because anytime you make changes to a team like that, you affect the morale and the culture of the team, which lowers the chances of something like a transformation being successful, even if you do make the change. So I think it's a mindset and a skill set thing here. And I think the mindset thing matters the most, but I'd love to hear what you think.
Yeah, I think that's fair, but don't you think it's also part of it that this is the phase that we're in? Like, leadership is moving so quickly and the desire to see those results are so desperate that causing that anxiety is almost secondary to them, right? Like, I think in months to come even, I think you will see a shift. I think when you can't see the path forward, you're going to do what is easiest for you, and sometimes that is just sort of breaking the team, And I think there's a sense of panic in a lot of pockets that we see, right? So I do think that this is momentary. I'd like to think the humanity of it will last and will push through, but I am hoping that this moment that we're in, where people are thinking about removing people first, is just a phase that we're in, because again, just the pressure and the panic of the moment.
I'm definitely feeling the pressure. And seeing it felt. And I think I am seeing that even senior people under pressure are willing to give teams the benefit of the doubt, but maybe only once, right? And on a skill set perspective, sure, maybe there's an opportunity to fill that gap with training very early on. It's frankly easier to do that than to drastically change a team. However, if the mindset is not there and it's detected that the team isn't getting on board, or is too afraid to move, or things are too entrenched to change, then leaders are changing them for the teams, right? And that's a cautionary tale, I think, for people in teams. Like, there needs to be forward momentum in the mindset and a willingness to change. Otherwise, those changes will be forced upon you. So it needs both sides, I think, to make it a good experience for everyone going through difficult change.
Well, I'll flip that back on you, because it was probably 3 years ago now that we were running around the East Village for the first time and talking about the tool and all that good stuff. From that moment where you were really in a position of telling people about this world that is coming, really sort of and then going to a position where you're in the heart of the world that we're in today, did you foresee the impact of the human aspect of this at that time? Or is this quite a surprise for you in the reaction that leadership has to the workforce?
Of course we foresaw it. That's why we called the company Pencil. It's like, it's a tool, not a replacement, right? We saw this 8 years ago, not 3. Like it was evident from the very first demos that we did at the very beginning of the company that there was fear, and at the same time it was so obvious that this technology was going to be promising, well, at least to us. So it continues to be a thing where the leader, the brand, the company will choose an approach. Do they want to go extremely aggressive, forcing the change, maybe not understanding the nuance, being willing to rip teams up and apart in order to get the fast outcome, but maybe ignoring the long-term implications? Unless you're going to be a one-person billion-dollar company real fast and you're going to get that done really well, you of course, good leaders consider the long-term implications on team morale. I think it comes down to, and we always encourage this, championing the super users. In any 10 group of people who are tasked with using AI and making it productive, there will be, as with any technology, your early adopters, your laggards, and then your bell curve, right? And there's 10 people, there's 2 early adopters, 2 laggards, and everybody else in the middle. And some people you just can't bring along. They either have a philosophical view against
100%.
it, right? You just can't. And that's a mindset thing, not a skill set thing. And some people are already all over it before you even knew about it. And how do you get them to influence the rest to come along with the journey? And there's never a situation where there are no casualties, but it's about minimizing that and bringing everybody along as best you can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a good point.
Got one for you here, flipping it around slightly more positive. When you're working with a client and it's genuinely going well, like,
yeah,
sometimes you get this, right? The transformation seem to kind of run themselves. What are they doing differently to make that work, so and make it seem so easy?
They have vision. I think that's the distinct difference, because it's a system that you're putting in place, right? It's not a tool. I mean, it's not tech alone. It's not tool alone. It's when you have a vision of how the culture and the tech will come together. I think that's when it's been most successful and the smoothest. Like you said, there's always casualties, but it minimizes the casualties. It lets people understand the road that they're on, and it also sort of minimizes the internal damage. So for me, yeah, that's been the biggest one. It's that determination. I mean, look, like change is one of the most difficult things to do in life, which is business, right? So those people who could really persevere and go through are people who have that vision and stick with it.
I think it's vision, willingness to make changes, and willingness to be changed. I think also, like, just the nature of this conversation with you in the US is different to a counterpart in Europe. So there's also a kind of national cultural thing here at play around change and how successful you can be at making change happen quickly. And the US is famous for doing as well.
Meaning, and let me press on that a little bit, so like just a little bit more resistance on that side, rather than, I mean, Americans do charge forward pretty well.
Is that, so you're agreeing with me or you're not agreeing?
I am agreeing with you. I'm agreeing with you. But how much of that, I guess, what are the manifestations of the two? I mean, I could understand like running for change in America. That just tends to be our nature. But how's it manifesting over there in Europe or in the UK, would you say?
You guys are just much more matter of fact about the realities of what is sometimes required. But because you're matter of fact, you're able to have a conversation, which doesn't necessarily mean you create lots of casualties and you default to replacing the team. Not at all. It just means that you're willing to even have a conversation about it, which makes it possible to make good decisions. And I think in other parts of the world, there's sometimes more reticence about even talking about it. Therefore, sometimes no decision gets made, which is worse than, potentially a suboptimal decision.
And I mean,
interesting.
What metrics you're looking at, the UK has a very high adoption of AI relative to most other countries. So there's that kind of ground-up approach to AI that's very, very present, as well as top-down influence. But there's a real drive from, certainly not all, but there's a drive from people at all levels of a company, individual contributors upwards, who want to be implementing AI into their processes. And sometimes it's actually more about how does an organization get on top of that and get AI implemented in the right way with the right controls in place, rather than do we implement AI at all?
That's definitely changed in the last 3 years. It's become much more inevitable feeling, even to people that weren't fully on board.
Oh, I agree. I think even in America, as much as we've been charging forward on it, I would say the difference between last year and this year is immense. It's immense, you know? Just the energy behind it is huge. But one for you, as we kind of dig into sort of Pencil and the evolution of Pencil itself over the past 3 years, talking about it from a point of view of like asset creation and production, and now transformation being such an important portion, such an important sort of like aspect of implementing it. What can Pencil change within organizations, in your opinion? Like, what is Pencil's place in transformation itself?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, we've tried to build Pencil with transformations in mind from quite early on, maybe not from the beginning, but certainly from 2023 when we joined the Brand Tech Group and started thinking very enterprise. 3 good examples here, right? Like the whole idea of having agents. We've had agents in Pencil, or at least a form of agents, for a year, maybe more than a year. Agents are very configurable and they lend themselves to lots of user groups coming in, right? Not just creative people, which is where Pencil started, but strategists and media buyers and planners and researchers and all the rest of it. So having more ways to bring more of the team into the fold, I think, is one way that you help transformations proceed. Pricing, we made a decision quite early on that we were going to leave users and workspaces and that kind of stuff unlimited, so that an organization could spread to markets and teams and that kind of thing without having to pay any more. That was intentional around helping transformations and lowering friction. More recently, things like brief mode, where we've kind of we've bitten off this need to accept a brief wholesale, right? Not down in prompts and generating an image, but like, what does an enterprise marketer need for an entire campaign? Sucking that into a platform like Pencil, and then figuring out automatically in some cases how agents should start to be spun up to answer that brief and how people can work with the agents along the way. So instead of having to go in and learn how to prompt to make an image, you're looking at a business process and saying, you already write briefs, right? Great. Just shove that into Pencil and then the river will take you downstream. So things like that, I think that are examples of where we're kind of like trying to meet both the buyer and user persona where they are, and solve problems in the way that the software is built, the features are built, it's priced, and all the rest of it, to just make transformation as easy as possible. I mean, last example maybe is transformations live and die on data and transparency, I think. And when things are going well, you want everyone to know. And when things aren't going well, you still want everyone to know. Because it reduces anxiety, right? It's like, if we know it's not going well, then at least we know, and we know what the problems are. So we have had an impact report in Pencil for 6 to 9 months, where you can basically see, not at an individual level, but at a team level, how many generations are being used, how many exports are being made, how much time, human time, is being spent. And then you can even put in your hourly rates and generation cost benchmarks to see what your cost per export is and your time saved. And it creates like a leaderboard, right, across teams. And, we've been doing that now for quite a long time. And we think that kind of transparency is important.
I mean, it does expose, you're almost kind of amazed by how okay people were in the past of like not knowing from a marketing process, right? There were so many black holes. I think that's the exciting part of sort of AI as well, and what we're doing at Pencil is like you said, it's okay to not know, but not know. It's okay to not be succeeding, but it's not okay to not know why, right?
Of course. And you mentioned smaller businesses versus bigger ones, right? Like, it's much harder to hide in a small business, and for things that aren't working to remain invisible. You can't. In a big business, it's really, really easy for things that don't work to remain invisible, and AI is exposing some of that, which is great. And people love working in transparent organizations, and the more that technology can flatten things and do that, I think that's a good thing. But you got to look for ways to reduce anxiety levels and to bring people along. And Tim knows very well that part of that is training, but it's not all of it. You can't train for mindset, and mindset goes to things like product experience and brand of Pencil, right? Not just buttons to click. So, and you creating communities where users can talk to each other and learn from the best and learn from each other, that kind of stuff is necessary. And you can't replace your team and hire a new team off the street and expect them to get that stuff right either. You got to do that as a leader.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. So when you're talking about sort of Pencil and being able to be that enterprise solution and the elements that you were talking about in making that process a lot easier and more smoother, do you think you're helping and Pencil is helping in those broken processes that we're talking about earlier? And if it's being able to help, how is it able to help?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting question. Is it helping? Is the product helping with the transformation? Really, like real talk. Because most transformations are still in the early stages, the best signal I can give you to answer that question is how customers respond to a feature that they didn't ask for, right? Like nobody asked us for brief mode. They've already got workflow management tools. But when we position it to them as what's wrong with your workflow management tools is probably that the briefers submit briefs that are bad. That's existed since the beginning of time. What our version of briefing, it deploys agents to read the brief and push back on the briefer. Hey, this brief you've got for a local market doesn't actually align with the cultural nuances and the trends of that market. The slang is wrong, or whatever the case may be. Or this asset you're asking for isn't actually right for TikTok, or whatever, right? So our implementation solves for the underlying problems that you weren't briefing properly. That's not something that a lot of workflow management tools are trying to solve for, because they're not trying to solve for transformation. Another thing on that same feature is, sure, do your briefing in the tool you've always used. Push that brief into Pencil. Where we're going to get really good is turning the brief into a string of agents that answer that brief and give it a first pass before any human has to look at it. Your workflow management tool isn't going to do that either. So we're not trying to replicate your workflow management tool and take that SaaS revenue or whatever the case may be, but we are trying to solve the underlying problems that you had before you adopted that tool, and you still have. And customers love that stuff. They're like, oh my God, we're solving a fundamental problem that's always existed. Now we like it. Like now we can see how, because changing processes is hard. How do you do that? You write a document, there's a new process, and you beat people to kind of follow it. If the software just kind of, you flow down the river of change because the software makes it easy, it makes change easier.
It's also just a big element here, I think, in the Pencil platform of putting those human touch points in the right place as well. Like, I think the transformation becomes a lot easier when humans as users still feel in control of what they're doing.
I think it's the right place and actually having, I mean, it's a balance, right? In the creative process of having a lot of input and then the controlled input, right? Or controlled sort of output as well. Because what I always love about when I demo Pencil and stuff is showing how collaborative it actually is and how it breaks that linear process of production. I think that's just like the greatest part. And so it is interesting to see where it is that it can affect processes and having people be a bit more collaborative.
So I've got an anecdote for you that speaks directly to that, right? Like one of the most controversial decisions we made was to make workspaces essentially public, right? Like everyone in that workspace can see everybody else's stuff. Now, in the very early days of Pencil, we would go into a workspace to check on how a client is getting on, and there'd be nothing in there. We're like, oh God, they're not using it. We'd check the logs, and actually they've generated tons of stuff. They deleted it all because they didn't want anybody else to see their stuff.
Of course.
Because they were nervous it was bad, right?
Yeah.
So that goes to like what it takes to cultivate creativity, right? And a little bit of privacy and nurturing is necessary. And that's a fundamental problem that's very hard to solve with software, unless you make things very private, but then you lose the efficiency of people swapping templates and learning, right? So only a safe team that feels comfortable sharing and trying things will, and if you're just under pressure, that's a good example of where the whole thing will grind to a halt.
Mm-hmm. No, I think it's the difference. I mean, kind of talking to your point of mindset, right? It does change the mindset of the creative. It's about protecting the creative process, but not being precious about it. And I think that preciousness in the past has hurt the process in various ways. So I think it's an interesting place to be.
It has. And I think it's interesting that, like in Pencil, we're talking about brief mode, you can, as a client, submit your brief, and then you can jump into the canvas and see it being worked on. Or this is the equivalent of the client standing over your shoulder in the agency, right? And nobody likes that. And nobody wants to be criticized for work that's incomplete, and that kind of thing. But at the same time, there's some great creative teams that are basically going to real-time creativity and are sitting with clients in meetings and mocking things up, right? So it's just about, to Tim's point, giving the creative people ownership over the sharing of the partial product. It's all about ownership and control.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
I mean, I've got one more question for you, Elaine, if you don't mind.
Okay. Yeah. I think I have another one for you too to close out. Go for it.
Okay. All right. So if you could get every CMO in a room and ask them to sit with one question they haven't really asked themselves, they haven't really challenged themselves on about AI transformation, like hold up a mirror to them, right? What would you put to them?
I mean, I'll give it to CMOs because I think they've actually thought about a lot, because in the C-suite, the CMO position has been tough and problematic for probably 10 plus years. It has the shortest tenure. I think a lot has changed within marketing because of technology that's rolled out. I think one thing is about brand loyalty. Like, how does brand loyalty change in the world of AI? I think that's the one thing that I would love to hear, sort of how they think about that future. And the last one for you is, where are we in 6 months? Use your crystal ball. Where are we?
Yeah, that one's really easy to answer. I think last year, everyone spoke about agents, but no one really knew what that felt like. Where do the agents live in my organization? Like, are they like an employee? Are they something else? Now it's very, very clear what agents are, where they're going to live, what it's like to interact with them, thanks to things like OpenClaw going viral, right? So many people have had their experience leveled up by that. And I love that it was an open source initiative that blew the top off of that question. And that's exactly where we're going with Pencil as well, right? That feeling of agents that are more, they remember you as an individual, they understand your brand more deeply, and they get the difference. They message you when they have an idea, as opposed to waiting for you to message them. They can code, which means they can solve any problem that you need them to solve in context. There's so much good stuff coming that solves a lot of transformation problems and product problems easy in the next 6 months.
Okay, that's the tech side. What's the human side? Do you think people will adapt quicker?
Yeah, human side. And thanks for pulling me up on that, by the way. Nice.
Yes.
So I had a conversation with Juliet, who's our head of creative, about owning the personality of our orchestrator in Pencil, because I think that it's important that its soul.md file, its personality, is nurtured by the right person. So a person who is going to make sure that these little assistants that spring up and remember every user in Pencil and in context of the brand that they're working on, make it easier for them to do the best work of their life, right? That are a true assistant, not a sycophant, but also not an opinionated AI that knows better than them, that is going to raise them up as users and is going to make them feel like they've got their own little Jarvis, their own little superpower, their own little team, no matter how senior or junior they are, that backs them up and makes them look great, and gives them doesn't dictate that or give them a button to click, but just gives them the feeling of that, right? That is what I hope it will feel like. Not like, oh my gosh, this thing is now taking my job. It should not feel like that. I don't think it will, actually. I think if you've used OpenClaw and tools like that, you don't get that feeling at all, which I think is really promising.
The really fascinating thing here
Good.
is I spent a lot of my time asking people what the world looks like in 6 months' time, a year's time, etc. Will is the one person who always has a coherent, logical, thought-through answer to that. I just feel like you're 3 steps ahead all of the time, Will.
That's very kind of you to say. I mean, in many ways, William Gibson, right? Neuromancer. The future is already here. It's just even unevenly distributed. So it's just about the small signal. Always obsessing with like what is just being whispered about that sets your spidey sense tingling. You'd be surprised at how much those gut instincts are right. And I think there's tons of small signal in the market today, whether it's on where the tech is going, like this with OpenClaw, which started very, very small and of course got very big. Or it's like the grumblings in your team about what they do or don't like about AI and the problems. Like, you got to listen to the small signal. That's how you get ahead of things. Yeah, I just think I think we have been forced to do that because we've been doing AI for so long before AI was a thing that we've just got very sensitive to the way the wind is blowing. So it's a skill. You can develop it. Anyone can.
Cool.
Well, hopefully we can start embedding that skill into all of our clients as well as part of a perfect end-to-end transformation process.
Just make it easy, make it fun.
Exactly.
So, I think just to sum up, we've talked through transformation a lot today, and there have been some really interesting perspectives from both Elaine and Will. But at the core of it, transformation isn't an AI problem. It's an organization problem. It's a systems problem. It's getting things right at a human level, at a structural level. Organizations know that there is change coming. They've seen what AI can do. They're not hiding away from that anymore. But what they need to start from is, what are they trying to achieve? Who's going to do it? And what are they willing to let go of to make it happen? AI doesn't fix the broken brief. AI doesn't fix a team that's out of alignment. AI doesn't fix a client relationship without honest conversation. What it does is it makes good work faster, sharper, more scalable than anything that we had before, more scalable than anything that most people had imagined before. And that's what Pencil's built for, and that's the transformation worth having. So, thank you, Will. Thank you, Elaine. And thank you, everyone, for watching. See you next time.
Bye-bye.
The Pencil Perspective. New episodes bi-weekly.